Hey everybody. So I've been kind of getting back on the horse, as you've probably noticed, where I'm working on several different projects. I've got my private communities, I've got my podcasts and content, but I'm also getting back into the research and build phase. So I guess I'll give you a quick update. The Raspberry project is proceeding nicely. We've had several really good internal team calls, as well as some calls with some outside interested parties. Very exciting stuff. I don't want to share anything prematurely, but we have attracted some positive attention. The team is also very excited, which is always good, and we're getting organized and so on and so forth. So, with all that being said, what I wanted to kind of bring you up to date with, and kind of the subject of today's video is what is the future actually going to look like in terms of the deployment of general intelligence or super intelligence, specifically on the software side? So I'm not going to talk about the robots as much today, although there will be some impact on how robots are deployed and how they communicate and that sort of thing. So to provide some context, I need to tell you kind of the kinds of people that I've been talking to behind the scenes. So this includes Silicon Valley insiders. This includes open source founders. This includes venture capitalists, as well as some higher ups in various companies. Unfortunately, I can't reveal my sources. Just you know how it goes. So again, keep in mind this is my interpretation of the perspectives that have been shared with me, and this is also not a comprehensive view of the entire industry, but it is based on some insider conversations. And when I say insider, I don't mean secret knowledge. I just mean people who are closer to the metal than even I am. So let's go over just a handful of facts. Some of these are facts. Some of these are predictions. So let's go over a handful of, let's say, assertions. A handful of assertions about how the world will look in the coming few years. And then use that as kind of a jumping off point to kind of riff on how things are going to work. So number one, it's basically a foregone conclusion that we will soon have billions of agents, both in the public and private, kind of some that are air gapped working inside of companies, some that are working between companies, some that are working for you, and so on and so forth. So billions of agents are coming as soon as possibly next year. Because here's the thing. Once you solve the underlying software architecture and models and the APIs, once you've got those best practices in place, it is easy to spin up one agent or a billion agents or a trillion agents. And there are lots of companies, some more publicly, some open source, some closed source, working behind closed doors, lots of people working on making agents a thing. Now, they're going to be globally spread across tens of thousands of data centers. America alone, I think last I checked, had about 5,300 data centers. And second place in the long distance, I think, was China with around 2,000 data centers. Anyways, you've probably heard in the news, Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, Meta, all of them are talking about investing literally hundreds of billions of dollars into data centers in the 5 gigawatt scale, which is enough to power roughly 3 million homes, which is just freaking ludicrous in terms of the amount of juice that's going to be poured into these. So some of these are going to be the biggest data centers we've ever seen. Some of them are probably going to be spread out because you don't necessarily want to put all of your eggs in one basket. But so we're going to see many new data centers being built. Another thing that I've heard is there's a very strong consensus that even though foundation models, the closed source versions like, GPT-5 and whatever, those are probably going to stay where they're at in terms of closed source just because they're so expensive. But you can squeeze a lot of juice out of cheaper open sourced models. And so what we're predicting is that there's going to be a lot of commoditized models, that a lot of LLMs are just going to be, white box off the shelf, a dime a dozen before too long. And, the reasons remain the same, which is that all the research going into how to make them is open source. You look at the fact that every time OpenAI releases something, it doesn't take long for the open source community to duplicate it. So there's not a whole lot of advantage to having closed sourced models, which is one of the reasons why I tend to agree with Meta and Mark Zuckerberg here, which is it's just an enabling technology. Kind of the way that I've started thinking about language models is they're just the new CPU, but it's also more like Python in that Python is free for everyone to use. I suspect that language models are going to eventually kind of go the way of Python, where here's a 200 megabyte language model that'll do X, Y, and Z. Here's a 2 gigabyte one. Here's a 200 gigabyte one, and so on and so forth, because they basically will become a public good, is kind of how I think about it. And you might say, well, that could be bad, because what if these models are able to make nukes or bioweapons and that sort of thing? That is another conversation, and it remains to be seen. But it's also entirely possible that there will just be regulations that if you publish an open source model, there's a few things that it won't be able to do, like work on bioweapons and gain of function research, those sorts of things. But beyond that, there's the blast radius is going to be relatively small. Okay, so models will be commoditized sooner or later. The next assertion is that it's basically going to come down to software architectures or system architectures or cognitive architectures. So basically, you can have the best language model or multimodal model, but if it's just a model, it's a genius in a jar. The model itself, it doesn't really matter how smart it is. I mean, that tells you how useful the model is. But it's like an engine, right? If you have a Ferrari engine, but you don't have the rest of the Ferrari, it doesn't matter. Likewise, if you have a turbofan jet engine, it doesn't matter if you don't have the rest of the F-22. And so the rest of the architecture that goes around the models, that is just as important. So if you think of the language model as kind of the power plant or the CPU of these new systems, that kind of helps you see where it's going to fit in. And so companies like OpenAI, that they are really just a one-trick pony. They make models, they make the best models. Okay, great. They've made a usable product. Sure. But in the grand scheme of things, the fact that they've already had to really kind of clam up and hide try to hide their secret sauce with chains of thought reasoning. No enterprise is going to adopt something that is completely obscured, and certainly no military or government is going to adopt something that is completely obscured. Guess what? That creates a huge market opportunity for Meta and other people to just say, here's an open source model. You can use it and you can see the entire output top to bottom. And also between quantization and distillation, the models don't need to be that big to be incredibly useful at, say, for instance, writing code or writing plans or solving other kinds of problems. So it really comes down to the architecture, the rest of the system that you wrap around the models. And then finally, the fifth assertion is the rise of marketplaces. And so that's going to be powered by things like blockchain and cryptocurrency, which is basically agents having spaces to talk to each other. So I've actually had the kind of almost off chance privilege of talking to no less than 4 startups or VC firms that fund these kinds of startups that are looking at specific ways of deploying blockchains, cryptocurrency, and marketplaces for the AI-based future. So to do a quick recap of the 5 assertions is, number 1, we're going to have billions of agents sooner rather than later. Number 2, it's going to be spread out over at least thousands of data centers, if not tens of thousands of data centers in the coming years as they scale up. Number 3 is the models are going to be commoditized. There's going to be a huge capability boost in open source models. Basically, you get diminishing returns. Like, just because something can have an IQ of 250 doesn't mean that you need it. In many cases, an IQ of 120 is more than enough. And so open source models only being 6 to 9 months behind frontier closed source models, like, we're going to have GPT-4, GPT-5 performance here very soon in open source space. Number 4 is the rest of the system that goes around the model is just as important, if not more important, than the model itself, because you can squeeze a lot of juice from multi-agent frameworks with very small models. So when I say like the systems and the architectures, what I'm basically saying is multi-agent frameworks. Multi-agent frameworks have outperformed frontier models for a while now, and they will continue to do so. So again, the moat that OpenAI has is shrinking rapidly. And then finally, marketplaces that are powered by blockchains and crypto, and basically the marketplaces for agents talking to each other. Okay, so with all that being said, we've kind of set the stage. Now, how's this going to play out? What I'll say now is these are the trends that insiders are telling me about. So everything from here on out, those 5 assertions, everything after that is basically me kind of riffing and guessing. So this is just sci-fi speculation at this point. So I do want to kind of titrate your expectations. So one of the things that we've been talking about is the possibility of agents basically taking over more and more economic activity, including trying to find and make valuable new products or services for each other. So, for instance, imagine that you have slightly more sophisticated agents than what exists today, and they go out into a marketplace, a blockchain and cryptocurrency powered marketplace, and they say, "Hey, my user has X, Y, and Z needs. Does anyone have a service or an app that can do this? And I'll pay you. I'll bid 0.001 Bitcoin for it, or whatever, something like that." And so then other agents say, "Yeah, I got your problem solved right here," and you go from there. I was actually really surprised when I learned about this paradigm, because this basically creates a network of intelligence, and by creating a more decentralized, networked kind of intelligence where there are incentives. The incentive being cryptocurrency, which can then be used to purchase compute, energy, data, those sorts of things. Everything. My mind was completely blown when I was kind of woke up to the value of AI first marketplaces, because a tremendous amount of innovation can happen there. And the reason that you need a marketplace like that is because there's always going to be some kind of impetus. There's got to be some kind of motivation, some kind of source of resources. Now, who are going to be the people owning these agents? It's going to be people like you and me. So there, when some of these marketplaces first spin up, and there are some people in my community working on some of these DAO. So DAO is a DAO. It is decentralized autonomous organization, which is like, how do you organize humans around blockchains and crypto? But then, what do the humans want? Like, what is the DAO for? So you can use, some of the people that I've talked to are trying to build DAOs for controlling or managing physical resources. Some of them are using it for governance, and others are using it more for electronic or digital first, software development, those sorts of things. So you can hypothetically use a DAO for all kinds of things. So you get a group of people together, whether it's a single individual or a company or a city or a government or whatever, a big company like a corporation or an enterprise. Well, all of these stakeholders need stuff, right? You need goods and services, you need resources. And so then you say, okay, here's an example. I might have, I can imagine my own use case in 6 to 12 months where I have a marketplace and I talk to my agents, my digital agents, my AI agents, saying, "Hey, I need you to go find software that will automate X, Y, and Z components of my business. And, either do it yourself or find the resources, whatever." And so then, in the cyberspace that they've got, the server instances, or, whatever I'm paying for, they say, "Cool, let's go watch all of Dave's content. Let's read all of his blogs and figure out how we can automate some of this for him." And they'll talk to each other, and they might realize, well, we need some video processing services that we can't do ourselves. So let's go find some video processing services on a marketplace. Oh, and by the way, we have access to, like a wallet that Dave created for us that has the equivalent of, let's say, $500 in it. And so then they're able to look at the resources that they have access to, and they can prioritize and say, all right, well, and, for return on investment, we know that we should spend $50 for this automated video processing service. And then this will allow us to create more videos for Dave. And then we can put those videos out and see if we actually get that return on investment. That is the kind of behavior for me that I could imagine being enabled by these kinds of technologies. Now, you can imagine the same kinds of things happening all over the world for all different use cases. Here's another one. Let's imagine that you are a realtor, like you're a real estate agent or you work for a real estate firm, and you say, okay, well, housing supplies are getting low. Agent swarm, go figure out why housing is, inventory is so low. Figure out what other agents are doing about this, other realtors are doing about this, and then come back to me with some ideas about either how to pivot or whatever else. Like what can I do to set myself apart? And so they'll go out and rather than purchasing resources, they might be purchasing information from other agents saying, hey, who here has some good provable information about the housing market and housing inventory and realtor strategies? And some agents might say, oh yeah, hey, I've got some. And this is where zero trust proofs would come in. So a zero trust proof, let me see if I can explain this correctly. A zero trust proof allows you to do work on encrypted information without ever seeing the original information decrypted. So then you can have, with things like zero trust proofs, you can maintain privacy while still being able to prove that the information is authentic or that the result of that processing on that information is accurate. So it's like, okay, well, so here's some private realtor data. Here's an answer. So it's like you spend, let's say, the equivalent of like $15 of crypto on a zero trust proof to reverse engineer what other agents are doing, or whatever, something like that. I'm not as familiar with the real estate industry, but so then the agents get the answer, they get the information they need, and they after talking about it with each other in your own personal area network, your agents come back and say, here's what the data says. Here's what others are talking about. Here's some strategies. Oh, and by the way, we went and found some potential inventory for you to invest in, that sort of thing. Now, okay, so I've given you a couple of ideas. So like what happens here though? What happens ultimately is that marketplaces are really great ways to foster and facilitate innovation. And so basically the AGI or the ASI that we're building is not going to be some monolithic Skynet entity. It's going to be the networks, because networks of humans are collectively more intelligent than individual humans. What is a business? A business is a network of humans working to achieve economic output. A university or research scientists or nonprofit organizations, those are networks of humans working to produce meaningful information or meaningful science or whatever else. Likewise, if we have these hybrid organizations, potentially DAOs or more conventional companies that use DAOs, or at least the agents in the marketplaces, then you can say, okay, well, this marketplace is trying to match supplies with demand. So who knows what I need? Who can build what I need? Who can provide the information that I need? With who needs it. And then when you put out a new need into the marketplace will find a way to satisfy that need. Now, I'm not going to be like some guy who's just die hard, free market capitalism for everything, because free markets also create plenty of perverse incentives. But on the same token, by creating new marketplaces where there is this kind of high velocity rational scrutiny, or artificial scrutiny rather than an emotional scrutiny that humans are subject to. Now, granted, will humans be using this to exploit it? Absolutely. Like, some people have been accused of pumping and dumping, cryptocurrencies like Dogecoin, and you can induce demand. There's fabricated demand or artificially created demand for things, and that could skew the marketplace as well. But at the same time, when you conceptualize what this future marketplace could look like, with billions of agents spread out across tens of thousands of data centers, all powered by solar and wind and renewable and nuclear and fusion, and then you've got a variety of commoditized models. Basically, the software architecture that we build, the multi-agent frameworks, all the ones that are being built right now can use models interchangeably. So you use model routing. If you need to purchase some tokens from a really, really intelligent model that is hosted by Google or Microsoft or Meta or whatever, you can do that. But you're not going to be wholly dependent upon a frontier model. Instead, your agents will be able to economize. And in fact, because of that market pressure, there will be plenty of demand. So let's say one way to participate in this new marketplace is you're really good at making quantized and distilled models that are cheaper and faster than the competitors, but they're just as good at, let's say, coding or just as good at, say, negotiating advertising, those sorts of things. So there will be, before long, there will be not just tens of thousands, but hundreds of millions of different deep neural network models out there to choose from, all competing for market share. And some of them you'll just be able to sell outright instead of even just purchasing them. But some people will still host them because, again, if you like here's an example of how I imagine it will go. A future company working in this marketplace all that they will do is have a library of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of different models. NVIDIA is trying to do this with their NeMo library, by the way. But basically what you do is you get an API, and then you send a request to this company's API, like OpenRouter or whatever, OpenRouter 2.0, and you send a request, and it contains a little bit of context, a little bit of data, whatever problem it is that you're trying to solve, and then this and also part of this would be here's the budget limit, here's the preferred target rate that I'm willing to spend on this problem, and then it gets the request. You have a router that routes it to the correct model or set of models or multi-agent framework, and then it gives you an answer and then charges you, X number of tokens or whatever. There will probably be a negotiation phase where you just say, hey, here's the problem I'm trying to solve. Tell me how much it's going to cost. And you go to actually several of these companies with, their libraries of models, and they all bid on it. They say, oh yeah, I can handle this. I can handle this request, this chat bot or this multi-agent framework request. I can handle it for, 10 cents. I can do it for 15 cents. I can do it for $1.50 or whatever. And so then you have bidding, and bidding in marketplaces is a really good way to drive down prices, by the way. So then you'll end up favoring the companies that are available to do it right now. You'll favor the companies that provide consistent results. And that is how, artificial superintelligence is going to be the most nebulous, decentralized brain that you can possibly imagine. It's not going to be a single entity. It's going to be the white matter of the future is these marketplaces. I am wholly convinced that this is the direction that it's going. And to cap it all off, I'll kind of regurgitate something that someone said to me. It must have been almost 2 years ago now when we first started working on cognitive architectures. So the quotation is this: I realized that these things, referring to agents, are going to soon be spending more time talking to each other than us, meaning us humans. So yeah, that's the future that we're heading towards. That's how artificial superintelligence is going to manifest. It's not going to be one monolithic entity. It never was. It's going to manifest as multi-agent frameworks with billions of different options of configurations and millions of different models under the hood. So with all that being said, thanks for listening. I hope you got a lot out of this. Cheers.